1. Back in 2001, my mom moved my sister and I in with her boyfriend at the time. I was 8 or 9, my sister was 4 or 5, and everything was great. It was a 3-story house with a finished basement, and on the top floor were the bedrooms. Standing in my bedroom's doorway, you could see down over the landing and down the steps. Additionally, going down the steps from the 3rd floor and turning left led to a set of steps leading down from the 2nd floor to the 1st floor and into our living room. When I was in the 5th grade, I woke up around 1 in the morning on a school night. I sat up to stretch, looked at my clock, then immediately looked towards my door. I saw a pink apparition walk through my door, which was closed, and very slowly walk towards me. Before I could be scared, I noticed that she looked like an older black lady. This is very important. I dove under my covers and was up the rest of the night. I never told anyone what happened to me for a long time. Not my sister, mom, and especially her boyfriend, who I didn't want to tell because he always came off as someone who had an explanation for everything and had very logical thinking. That experience led to me researching ghosts, paranormal activity, aliens, cryptids, and so on. It was an eye-opening experience. After my experience happened, objects would move, but would do so when no one was looking. Phones would be on the hook 1 minute and all the way across the room the next. Kitchen chairs would be pushed out when they were all pushed in and no one in the kitchen. Stuff in my room would be missing, and I'd find them in the basement. These happened when I was alone and with others in the house. My family thought nothing of it, but I thought it was the ghost. My sophomore year, I had my best friend over to hang out, and we got to talking about ghosts and all things paranormal. When I mentioned I had a ghost, this was my first confession of having a ghost, but never mentioned what happened years prior. Foolishly, I mocked the ghost, demanding to move objects, saying she was scared and so on. My best friend's visit went fine. Everything was fine that night, and I went to bed late without a hiccup to my day or night. I woke up the next morning and felt a burning sensation on my leg, which had a scratch mark from the inside of my ankle, wrapped twice around my leg and up to my inner thigh. I apologized in my room out loud, and within the next few days the scratch was completely gone. No signs of scarring, no signs of previous injury, nothing. I'm going to jump to the summer leading into my senior year, which was the next time I saw the apparition. I was in my bedroom watching Step Brothers very late at night, when I heard a knock on my door. My sister's room is right next to mine, so I thought it was her and called out. I got no answer. So I rewound the movie to see if the knock was in the movie, and it wasn't. I unlocked my door, opened it up, and my eyes fell on the same pink apparition who looked exactly like she did when I was in the 5th grade. But she was walking down the steps, turned the corner to go to the living room. I wanted to go follow her, but instead just closed my door, smiled, and went to bed. At this point, I was fine with having her around, and would talk out loud to her when alone, but not mock her. We'd get cold spots in the house when the rest of the room was room temperature. Would hear footsteps from the room sometimes, and to my knowledge at the time, no one in the house had any other experiences like I had, so I kept my story to myself. I will say that was the last time that I saw the ghost or had a personal experience, outside of the footsteps and things being out of place. I moved shortly after, because my grandpa died, and moved in with my grandma. Honestly, though, I thought I was crazy, and always questioned myself about my experiences, until the summer I graduated made it all come together. My mom worked at a college, and knew a lot of students. We got close with a student from the UK, and invited him to our house to hang out often. He was like an older brother to me, and one night, my mom's boyfriend, him, and I talked about ghosts. And that was when I finally told my story. After finishing my story, my mom's boyfriend told me he believed me, and I asked if it was because he had any experiences. He told me that when the house was up for sale, he had become good friends with the owner, whose name was Ernstine. While they were in the middle of the sale, Ernestine had sadly died. Her family finished the purchase of the house to him, and he helped them move everything out so he could move in. He told me that Ernestine had died in the living room of the house, and she was an older black lady whose favorite color was pink. She had pink decor, curtains, rugs, just a whole lot of pink. I remember getting chills I never had before when he told me, and even told an experience he had at his childhood home, which was of him levitating from his bed, all the way up to the ceiling, and being dropped face first on his bed. His dad still lived in that house, and we stayed the night there sometimes, and the house always felt creepy to me, even before I knew of this story. I think Ernestine wanted to show herself and help be released to the other side. Why she chose me, I think me being a kid at the time helped, but my sister told me she had no experiences outside of, again, things being misplaced. Not too long after that, I left the house and never kept in touch with my mom's now ex-boyfriend, because my mom and sister moved to Kentucky. I'm in Ohio. Not too long after, I moved in with my grandma. It's a very important event to me, because it opened my eyes to a whole other world, and I still think about Ernestine, hoping she found peace and is well off. 2. I'd just like to cut the BS and go straight to my story, since I don't even know how to express this as clearly as I'd like to. I just woke up, and I'm not a fluent English speaker, so sorry if my English seems a bit funky. So, last night, I woke up around 4 a.m. because I had a serious urge to pee. Before I got to take any action, my eye caught some kind of human-shaped creature sitting on the chair next to my bed. I remember its skin was rather slimy, and it was a longish figure. Limbs were somewhat prominent, and it either had no head or it didn't have a face, can't remember properly. But there was really nothing truly notable about its experience. Actually, it kind of reminded me of one of my friends, like it seemed kind of normal despite having no face or head and appearing from nowhere in my bedroom in the middle of the night. When I saw it, I was a bit confused, but not afraid. I was totally able to move my body through the whole experience, since I remember changing my posture to sitting on the edge of my bed when I actually realized that I wasn't alone in my home. I live alone, and I felt like the situation needed some attention. Like I said, I wasn't afraid at any point. I kind of remember thinking like maybe I should be, but decided that fear wouldn't bring anything more to the situation, so I just sat there and stared at this mysterious shadow person. It didn't pay any attention to me, actually, just sat there minding their own business, I guess. First I was thinking that maybe I should ask them to leave, since they didn't have permission to hang out in my bedroom, but I decided not to make any contact with it. I don't know why, since I'm still dying out of curiosity, but I think everything went just like supposed. So, after like 2 of the longest minutes, I finally remembered my bladder and realized I truly needed to pee. I turned my back to the creature so I could turn on the light on my bedside table, and when I was done and got up from the bed, the shadow dude was just gone. No big emotions, no fear, no any typical sleep paralysis symptoms like anxiety, pressure, or being unable to move my body. The situation felt somewhat eerie, but I quite naturally accepted the presence of the whatever it was. I went to the bathroom, then back to bed and fell asleep again. This meeting was the first thing I remembered in the morning, and despite thinking this whole time I've been awake, I haven't succeeded in coming up with any logical explanation. Also, I'd like to add that I'm not on any medication. I've never been diagnosed with any psychological conditions or engaged in psychotic behaviors. I was totally sober when I went to sleep, and I've had no prominent stress in my life lately that could possibly explain this experience. 3. I'd like to start by saying that I personally have always believed in spirits. I've had other encounters with them, but the circumstances of what's currently happening have kinda left me stumped. I'm not sure exactly what I'm dealing with, and kinda hope you can point me in the right direction. Back in 2019, I moved in with my mother when I turned 18. My mother had moved back into the town I grew up in with my dad, separated, and I wanted to live with her for a bit. Her neighbor was your typical crazy lady, shouting at no one, would talk about seeing things, etc. When I moved in with my mother is when the knocking started. The bedroom I used would get knocks through the night on the wall that bordered the ladies' apartment. I always shook it off as just kitchen noises, because it bordered the neighbor's kitchen. But it always struck me as weird, since the knocks would start around midnight and continue sporadically throughout the night. I only ended up living with my mother for about 2 months before I had to move in with my boyfriend at the time. Long story. Doesn't pertain to paranormal stuff. The knocking continued after I left. My mother has also told me things that happened before I moved in, like hearing footsteps running through the house at night or what sounded like someone jumping in her living room. The raised floors make everything quite loud. I would walk on my toes to lessen my steps, so loud footsteps were quite odd in the house. Like I said, this was before I moved in, so I didn't witness it. 2020, the pandemic strikes and the neighbor next door passes away in the apartment. New neighbors move in, knocking continues. Nothing out of the ordinary. My mother spoke to the new neighbors about the knocking and asked if they were in the kitchen at night a lot. They said they thought we were making the noise. Early 2023. I stayed with my mom before going on a trip. I stayed in that bedroom again and could not sleep due to the loud knocks happening all night long, not like bumps here and there. It was like someone knocking on a door almost. All close together. My door was open. It was a hot summer night and I just laid awake watching the hallway. The hallway is a small connecting section where the bathroom door and bedroom doors all connect. Less of a hallway and more of just a small connection space. As I lay watching the hallway, I hear the loud creak of my mother's door. Her door always creaks, no matter how much oil we put on it. I wait, expecting to see her head to the bathroom or something. But there's nothing. No lights, no loud footsteps because the floors make everything so loud. Just quiet for a while. I keep watching and eventually a shadow passes between the two doorways. I'm freaked out at this point. But I don't get up because my little one is sleeping next to me. I had my kid in 2020. She's about 2.5 at this point. I didn't want to scare her. In the morning, I tell my mother and her husband about what I heard. Her husband told me that he heard the door creak open as well. Both him and my mom were in bed when it happened. He did not see the shadow like I had, though. The past 2 months, I'm separating from my significant other and move back in with my mother. My daughter and I are sharing that room now. The knocking continues. Thankfully, it doesn't bother my daughter so much. She is almost 3 now and sleeps through the night. My mom spoke to the neighbors again. They still don't know what could be causing the knocks. Life continues as normal. Then the weird stuff starts happening. I'm gonna list the occurrences separately, but in timeline order. Shower knocks. I'd been taking a shower and leaning against the shower wall, relaxing. The shower wall borders the outside of the complex, our backyard. No one back there, but 3 loud knocks vibrated against the wall I was leaning on. I could feel it like someone was in the wall. Blinds rustling. My aunt was staying the night on the couch. No fan, no open windows. She heard the blinds above the couch, metal ones, get rustled, as if someone ran their hands along them. Curtains. My mother, sitting on the same couch, felt something touch the back of her head. Reaching back, she found the curtain lifted from the floor and had been dropped on top of her head. We have no idea how. Lights flickering. I enjoy watching horror movies before going to bed. I wasn't allowed to watch them growing up, so I do a lot of catching up on horror movie classics and new ones that catch my interest. I was watching *Malignant* the other night. It was okay, and it had a lot of flickering lights. Almost every time a light flickered in the movie, my lamp would flicker in my bedroom where the knocks would happen. Voices. This experience is from my mother and her husband. While I slept, and they got ready for work, they heard my voice come from the living room. Even the dog looked in the direction they heard it. My voice simply said, "Okay," in a sarcastic tone. Cracks in the walls. This is what made me post. It left me freaked out. My daughter, on one of the nights she stays with me, she stays at her dad's occasionally, woke up several times. It was very out of the ordinary for her. She usually sleeps so well. On the fourth time she woke up crying, I asked if she wanted to sleep with me in my bed, so she did. At this point, she was wide awake, laying with me and staring at the wall the knocks come from. Quietly, she says, "The walls are cracking," which is a phrase she has never used before. I haven't even heard my daughter use the word cracking to describe something. She isn't even 3 yet. Again, she says the walls are cracking, but this time more excited, like she was anticipating something. Then she says it's coming through. I stare at the wall. Obviously, I see nothing. I ask her what is coming through, and she says, "The monster." Then begins to giggle and laugh, making faces at the wall. After asking what she saw, she explained they had a black face with a frown and their tongue out. She said they were scary, but she didn't seem scared. Eventually, I got her back to sleep and tried to get some sleep myself. In the morning, I asked her about it, and she looked at the wall and said, "The cracks are all gone now." I asked her details about last night, and the story didn't change. Cracks in the walls, something coming through, black face with frown and tongue out, scary but playful. Last night, I woke up in the middle of the night, 2 a.m. exactly, which is when the cracks happened, and noticed the door had been opened. I usually sleep with it shut, but it was open. At first, I thought maybe my kiddo woke up and walked out of the room, but she was still asleep in her bed. I went and shut the door. As I did, the fan in my window stopped turning. The light on it was still on, but the blade stopped turning. I went and had to turn it on and off again to get it to work. It struck me as weird, and with all the other things that have happened, I figured it's probably attached to it all. I've always believed in the paranormal, but never thought I had an experience until I remembered. When I was in middle school, my parents sent me off to summer sleepaway camp. Your standard outdoor adventure, song singing, marshmallow roasting shit show. I was not a willing participant. Don't get me wrong, I love the outdoors, but a month away from home? My Tamagotchi collection? And my own bed was not my cup of tea at 12. The layout of the campground was fairly standard. To my recollection, there was a large mess hall, ball pit, ropes course, and a winding path leading up to the 6 cabins we called home. The cabin closest to everything was the bathrooms. The rest were all boy and girl separated housing. The weirdest thing about this layout, though, were the front doors to the cabins, all faced away from the main path and toward the woods. Though it was easy to find your way around, it was definitely daunting when you had to go for a midnight stroll to the restroom. And that's really where our story begins, with my small bladder, my anxious mind, and a walk in the woods to go pee. When you had to use the restroom, it was a short trail along the right side of the cabin, to the dirt path that leads towards the larger buildings. At night, this path was lined with large construction lights and volunteer counselors that made sure none of the campers got up to any nightly shenanigans. It was very easy to find, heavily illuminated, and though still mildly terrifying, completely safe. It was one of my biggest camp fears. I woke up roughly around 2 a.m. and could not wait until morning to pee. I was not happy, walking out into the cold air, staring straight into the woods, and accepting my fate of an uncomfortable nightly stroll. The small path around the right of the cabin led directly to the larger dirt path, and though facing away from the lights was still fairly easy to visualize. I made sure I was properly equipped with a flashlight in hand and started my journey. Just a few steps when it happened. Everything went black, and I mean completely black. I could not see my hand directly in front of me. I stumbled forwards, wondering if maybe the lights went out. My eyes had adjusted. I knew where the path was, but the more I walked, the more twigs and sticks I felt against my legs. The further I went, the higher they became. I stopped. It had been about 2 minutes of walking, and I still could not see a thing. That's when I noticed the noise had also stopped. The drone of the forest. You know, the crickets chirping, your standard late-night ambient noise. It wasn't there. I panicked and turned 2 steps towards the way I came, and all of a sudden I was back and standing directly in front of the door of my cabin. The lights illuminated the cabin itself, the trees swaying in the night air. Everything seemed normal again. Thinking I was dreaming or attempting to block out whatever the fuck I just experienced, I walked forward again towards the right. My will to pee was too strong to contemplate anything else. And then darkness. I was surrounded by nothing. The more I walked, the more I felt the woods surrounding me, but I still couldn't see. I turned quickly this time, running towards the direction I believed the cabin to be in, and I was at my front door. My flashlight was gone. Now, one, typically, after an experience like this, would not make the decision to continue attempting the midnight stroll to the bathhouses. I did. I felt smarter about it this time for sure, trailing my fingers along the right side of the cabin, as I attempted to make the turn onto the larger dirt path one more time. Nothing disappeared. I rounded the corner, got the helpful nod from the counselors on duty, and made my way into the bathroom and back with no further issue. When I curled up in bed, I chalked it all up to a dream, my mind playing tricks on me. And in the morning, my cabin counselor did too, until she saw my legs. I was rushed off to the nurse for the large mud-covered gashes, multiple bug bites, and unexplained rash. To this day, I still don't know what I experienced, or if it was even paranormal in nature. But I remember the quiet, the black, and wonder. Does anyone know what could have happened to me that night, or had a similar experience? Thanks for listening to my long-ass story. 5. My old house was always creepy. I remember at a very young age, about 6 years old, being super excited as a vicar was coming around to talk with my mother. She suffered mental health all her life and at the time was looking to religion for help. Unfortunately for me, his visit was after my bedtime, but I couldn't sleep. In hope that I'd be allowed downstairs, I was just one of those kids that always wanted to meet new people. Eventually, I heard someone walking up the stairs. The house was very old and creaky, and towards my bedroom. My door opened, and I listened as the floorboards made their usual noise, as someone was walking across my bedroom. But there was nobody there. I had a nightlight in my room, so could see very well. That sort of thing would happen quite often. Usually just opening my bedroom door and the feeling of being watched. I can't say I was scared back then. Fairly uneventful experiences until 1995, and I remember it like it was yesterday. I was 15 years old and home alone. My parents had long since divorced. My dad, who I lived with, was spending the night with my now stepmother, who lived 2 streets away. We were moving from the house, and I was packing up my bedroom. Should have been, but actually I was watching wrestling. About midnight, I went to bed. Was reading a magazine, and suddenly I felt the most awful fear and became extremely nauseous. My dog and cat were in the bedroom with me. My dog began hysterically whining and barking at the whole room. She even peed on the floor. My cat was on the windowsill with her face pressed into the curtain and was crying pitifully. I suddenly realized I was being watched from the corner of the room as my dog barked and backed off at that part of the room. I couldn't even lift my head to look as the fear was disabling me. But eventually I was able to get up and run for it. the worst part of it all was I felt this presence right behind me. I got to the front room and rang my father, saying that he needed to get here fast. I was absolutely terrified beyond words. With this unexplainable feeling of fear of being stared at, it was actually painful. Makes no sense, I know. I don't know how, but I managed to unlock the front door and run into the street and fell in the middle of the road. All this time being watched by something which was now in the doorway, staring. What it looked like? I have no idea. It's like my brain never registered it. My poor dog was stuck halfway on the stairs, crying and terrified. As my dad arrived, he was able to go and get her, and I never went back into the house again. My dad talked to me the next day, and told me of his experiences in that house. For instance, he'd always nag me to hold the banister coming downstairs. He told me the reason being he'd often been grabbed and tripped. He said upstairs of the house was by far the worst, and he'd never mentioned it to me, as he didn't want to scare me. Now on to the reoccurring dream. I'd say this started a year or so after leaving the house, 1996-ish. It started with me coming home from school, sunny day, feeling very happy, going into the front room of the house, and everything seems good. Then I walk towards the back of the house, into the kitchen, and it's heavily raining and getting very dark outside. I now head outside in the garden, and there's a storm outside. I'm getting absolutely drenched and the wind is hammering me, and I suddenly realize I'm sobbing uncontrollably. Then this feeling overcomes me. I'm facing away from the house and I can feel I'm being watched from my bedroom window. My bedroom window looked out toward the garden. I finally brace myself and get the courage to turn towards the house to look at this thing. And then I wake up. About 15 years ago, I'd usually have this dream about 2 or 3 times a month. I had the dream again. I turned around. This time I made eye contact, and I saw it was the same face that had chased me out of the house all those years ago. I woke up and instantly forgot the face, and that was the last time I ever had that dream. I've never experienced anything like it since, and I hope I never do. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 344. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do hit that like button. It helps YouTube recommend it to other people. And if you'd like to get these videos a little bit early, then you can support me on my Patreon, which is linked in the description. Next to that, you'll also find a link to the Hellfreezer Teespring store, where you can get yourself some Hellfreezer merchandise. And you can make donations during streams or videos just like this one. While you don't have to do this, I do appreciate it. And it helps keep the lights on, which helps me do this for as long as I can. Okay, let's see. I don't think there's any other business today, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is: how many books have you bought with the intention of reading that you've yet to get around to? I'm only going to include physical books here, because if I include audiobooks, that number goes up quite a bit. Although I do consider audiobooks reading. I think I've got about 5 currently. Let me think. There was River Everett's Red Carpets and Other Banana Skins. I've started it, not finished it. Pet Sematary, also started, not finished. Anno Dracula Daikaiju, 1999, also started, not finished. And let me see. There was, that Alfred Bester book, The Demolished Man. I've got that one too. Those are the ones off the top of my head. There may be some others. I think I had Julian Clary's autobiography as well. Those are the ones I bought with intention of reading, just never had time to do. Every other book on my shelf I have read, and I bought it because I enjoyed it and I wanted a copy in my collection. But why don't you let me know what some of yours are in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.